factory fire. Some of you know this history where women were throwing themselves out windows because of the sweatshop conditions. A fire broke out. They were locked in and they died on the pavement below. We didn't turn against each other. We turned to each other and changed laws, federal laws. But what is our distraught present now? Our distraught present now is that our children, our families, God, at a concert in Las Vegas, at a nightclub in Orlando, people are murdered, slaughtered, and nothing changes. At a church in South Carolina, at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, people are killed while worshiping and nothing changes. And our children are getting killed under their desks, hiding from Newtown to Parkland. And the strongest nation on the planet Earth, what is our response? To stand together, to work together, to keep our children safe? No. Now we're sending our kids to school with the implicit message that we can't protect you, so we're going to teach you how to hide. We are now at a point in America where there's more shelter-in-place drills in our public schools than fire drills. This is not who we are. We are not each other's enemy. We are each other's hope. We are each other's promise. And our politics, our civic spaces must begin to reflect that. And if you don't think, and if you don't think that's the way to win the elections, that's how we won the fights to beat a machine in Newark. We got more people coming out to vote than had ever come out to vote. It was great record turnouts, I should say. Look, the last election, in key states that we lost as Democrats, there were less people that voted for Donald Trump than voted for Mitt Romney. And we shellacked Mitt Romney. Look, if you just look at African Americans alone, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the black vote dropped hundreds of thousands of voters. In Milwaukee alone, in those three states, we Democrats lost by 77,000 votes. In Milwaukee alone, 70,000 less blacks came out to vote than had voted in the previous election. Martin Luther King said it. He said that what we have to repent for is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And so, God bless America. What this election needs is candidates who will stand up and ignite the excitement and the energy of the fullness of our coalition. Yes. We'll get people to come off out of their seats, recognizing that democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy is a verb. It's what you do. And so, in that spirit, I want to end with just a family story. Because I know who we are. My destiny was changed by a room like this where people came together. It wasn't as nice smelling as this. This is a gorgeous smell, man. I'm getting hungry. It was living rooms. You see, my family 50 years ago was trying to move from the South to this Mecca. I don't know if you've ever heard of this place. It's called New Jersey. And they wanted places with great public schools. And every time they show up in these beautiful suburbs in northern New Jersey, they happen to be all white towns. And here was this black family. And every time my parents would show up at a house, a real estate agent would see it's a black family and lie to my parents and say, oh, this house is sold. This house is pulled off the market. My parents were frustrated. They were distressed. But what did they find? They found a group just like this, patriots, who understood their values, love thy neighbor, welcome the stranger. And they told my parents, don't worry, we're gonna get this going for you. And they set up a sting operation where my parents would go look at a house. This group of mostly white folks would send my parents out to look at a home, and if they were told it was sold, they would leave, and a white couple volunteering would follow them to see if the house was really for sale or not. In the house that I grew up in, my parents were told it was sold. They left, the white couple came, showed up, found out it was still for sale. A bid was put on the house by the white couple. The bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and on the day of the closing in the real estate agent's office, the white couple did not show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer. And they walk in, yes. But this is not the end of the story, because they walk in, and the real estate agent sees he's been caught by this sting operation. I call it a conspiracy of love. But he didn't feel so angry. He stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face. And then he sings a dog on my dad. And let me tell you, as I was growing up in this beautiful home, every time my dad would tell this story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually, it's like, boy, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house. People want to know why my first job out of law school was going to work as a lawyer in one of the poorer communities in America. It's because, I went off to Stanford after growing up in that beautiful town. Don't get impressed. I got in there because of a 4.0, 1,600, 4.0 yards per carry, 1,600 receiving yards. I was a football player. But I stayed and got my master's, was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, came back to Yale Law School. My dad is not impressed. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, young man. It's about the service you give. Yeah. You, like all Americans, drank deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you did not dig. People fought for you, struggled for you. A guy took a punch for you to even grow up in the town you grew up in. And so I went to Newark, New Jersey to be a tenants' rights lawyer because people fought for my housing rights. I went to work for other people's. I learned right away the way we beat powerful bullies, slumlords, wealthy men. The way we beat them is by organizing people. The first slumlord, we got convicted in federal court because we organized folks, got more people involved. I took over a city because we organized folks, got more people to turn out. We transformed that city. Biggest economic development period in 60 years. Went from 60 years of population decline to population growth. Took a school system that was one of the worst in the state to now the #1 school system in America for beat the odds schools, kids in poverty going to college. All those weren't about me, it was about we. I went to Washington and began that same kind of work. The only bipartisan major bill to pass under this president is the one that I led in coalition from the Democratic side for criminal justice reform. But the test is our unity. The test is our ability to put that indivisible back in this one nation under God. But here's the final confession. When I got to Washington, I decided to do what a lot of senators do that have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And if your name is Booker, it's a lot of pressure, everybody. You gotta give me some sympathy for that. So I decided to go back and find those people 50 years ago who helped me move into the town. The head of the group, she was easy to find. She was 93 years old. And the reason she was easy to find is because she's still head of that group in northern New Jersey. She doesn't represent black families anymore in housing issues. She represents same-sex couples and Americans with disabilities and Muslim families, because to her, justice has no color, no race, no orientation. It's one justice, one nation, one love. And this is the point of why I'm running. This is the point of my life's career. It's summed up in when I found that lawyer and asked him to confirm the facts of the story. I found him as an 84-year-old man, retired New Jersey judge. He confirmed all the facts of the story. I finally figured out how big that dog was. and I asked him finally, one question I didn't have, I just had to know. Finally, after he told me the whole story, he was struggling to make it at that point in his life. Just started a small business, was a busy man, trying to provide for his family. I had to ask him the one question, which was, why, sir? Why would you, as a white guy, do so much to help black families moving in your neighborhood, sir? Why, at a time of fears of white flight or real estate prices going down, why would you do it? And he goes, well, I know the moment I made the decision. And I go, well, what was the moment? And he goes, well, the moment was March 7th, 1965. And I'm like, that's very specific, sir. What was going on March 7th, 1965? And he said he was basically sitting at home watching TV. Now, for some of you that are younger in this room, you might not remember or know that there was a time of great hardship in America where we only had 3 channels in this country. And you had to get up and change them yourself, for crying out loud. This is why I think my dad had 2 boys. He needed somebody to change the TV channels, for crying out loud. So most of America on March 7th, 1965, it was a Sunday, it was home watching TV, watching a movie. Some folks that are my age, a little older, might, in fact, finish the title of the movie, you'll know it. The movie most of America, millions and millions of us were watching, was a movie called Judgment at Nuremberg, right, about the aftermath of the Holocaust. And on this historic day, a man is sitting at home watching TV, an American. And that movie that had him gripped, they broke away from an ongoing movie to show breaking news. Next thing you know, this man in New Jersey is watching a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Millions of Americans suddenly are watching this handful of Americans who started a march from Selma, were trying to go to Montgomery, got stopped on a bridge by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass, and then those troopers gassed those marchers and stormed in with billy clubs drawn and just started viciously beating them, cracking them in the head, knocking people unconscious. We now know this day as Bloody Sunday. But tragedy happens in America. Hate happens in America. Brutality happens in America, but it's never defined us. What defines us is how we, as ordinary Americans, choose to respond. And so what did a man on a couch 1,000 miles away do? Did he just sit there and treat this democracy like a spectator sport? Did he get overwhelmed and allow his inability to do everything to undermine his determination to do something? No. He stood up from that couch. And his immediate thought was, I'm going to go to Alabama, but then he suddenly realized he couldn't close his small business. He couldn't even afford a plane ticket. But he entered this great American tradition that folks in this room know about. In a time, in a moral moment in America, he stood up and said, well, you know what? I guess I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And this young new lawyer called around to see who might need some help. He finds a young woman, now 93 years old. He says, he needs some help. She's like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. I need some help. And the two of them started working together. And they plotted out this sting operation, conspiracy of love. They got other people to volunteer. They got their neighbors involved. They filled the living room. 65 turned to 67, turned to 1969. Other lawyers were volunteering. And he'll never forget the day, he tells me, that he gets this one particular case file handed to him of a family coming from the South, struggling to find housing, turned away again and again and again. And he says, Cory, we helped that family. And you know what their names were? The names on the case file? I go, sir, I don't. He goes, well, the two names on that case file were Carrie and Carolyn Booker, your parents. Think about this for a second. I am standing here, a United States Senator, only the fourth black person in our country ever elected to that office, because one white guy on a couch in 1965 didn't stay on that couch. He stood up for generations yet unborn. He stood up for his fellow Americans. He stood up for love. He went to work and set off a set of dominoes that affected the lives of thousands of people. Heck, I'm running for the highest office in the land right now. Literally, I could be the first descendant of slaves in our country ever to go to the White House, which was built by slaves. This, where we are right now, is no different from that group that got together in 1965. Ordinary Americans coming together for an extraordinary cause. That's who we are. Yes. And I'm telling you, Iowa, right now, and Enola, I'm telling you this right now. The ignition point is right here in your state. To energize and to excite a nation, it starts right here in Iowa. I'm asking you to stand with me. If you believe this election, yeah, it's about policy ideas, and it's about the head, but it's also about the heart and the gut and the spirit of this country. I'm running for president because of that reason, because I know who we are, and I know the change we need to be making in our country is only made when we turn to each other, not against, when we revive those ideals of grace and decency and mercy and love, when we know that there's only one American destiny, not a Republican one or a Democratic one, not a rural one or an urban one, there's one American destiny. And the only way to achieve it is if we stand together and work together. That is how America, we will together rise. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right. I see some hands going up already. And I'm going to go to the gentleman with the red hat. He was the first one. He started like 20 minutes ago. He had his hand up. I love it. Yes, sir. Say your name out. Let's create some community here. It's important.
Senior citizen as a farmer.
Who's a senior citizen, sir?
I am.
Are you sure, sir?
A long-term livestock man all my life, and as editor of the leading ag magazine in the country, I supported you, or I wouldn't be here.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
But I say that with a but.
Uh-oh.
I've also seen where you have supported legislation against the large
Multinational corporations, yes.
and so forth.
Yeah, yes, sir.
And also against the Packers and Stockyards Act.
Yes, sir.
Which is against paying for quality livestock.
Yes, yes, sir.
And coming to a state like Iowa, where we're number one in pork, we're in beef, we're in eggs, we're in turkey, and I don't see how you defend that.
So may I answer, sir? So this is actually legislation that I wrote with Iowa farmers. And actually even some Republican, not Iowans, for farmers who I met with around the Midwest, talking to them about what are their pain points, sir. Because right now the independent family farmers are going out of business, and you probably know this because you probably write about it. And we're driving them out of business. Why? Because their share of the consumer dollar has been consistently going down. So when people in my city are buying their pork or buying their products made with corn, that dollar that they're spending, less of it's going to the farmer than has gone to in generations. And that is something that's a real crisis. I think you, sir, are the solution in our country for rural economies and improving them. I think you're the solution in our country, sir, for climate change. And so all of my legislation has been working with farmers, asking the question, what do you need to thrive and succeed? And so the reason why I'm against these big agricultural mergers, sir, is because what's happened to farmers now is they're getting squeezed from above and below. Companies like Monsanto have been buying up all these other companies and raising the prices of your seeds and chemicals. Meanwhile, you used to have to sell your pork 4 and 5 people that would buy your pork, and now you've got one person who's dictating you price, and you're getting squeezed. And so the legislation I wrote is not to attack farmers, it's to relieve that squeezing and to start to do what the Packers and Stockyards Act was meant to do, which is to hold these big aggregators accountable and make sure there's more competition there. And then as far as these big CAFOs, let's lay this bare. Because I don't want to tell you, sir, how to do what you do, your hogs or your cattle. You're not who I'm focused on here. I'm focused on these poor farmers now that are contract farmers for these bigger corporations that are doing things to them that I think are taking away their rights and their competition. They tell them, dictate on them on everything. Most of these folks are in a lot of debt too. And they're being pit to each other, against each other in this tournament system where they have no view into even what their pay is. I just have a bill that says let's give them a lot more rights against these big multinational corporations. But I'm telling you this right now. I wrote that with Iowa farmers at the table. I got the highest legislative award from one farmers group, the Farmers Union. But I'm willing to continue to learn on these issues and continue to listen on these issues. Yes, sir.
I agree that we need certainly legislation regarding the location of these.
Yes, yes.
It's very, very difficult.
It is
to
difficult.
legislate the economics
Of farming these days. And so can I tell you that last point about how I'm going to get more money in your pocket, sir? It's also, I believe, fundamentally this country has been wrong in that we allow oil companies to pay no taxes. When I know you pay taxes, sir, we literally have companies like Chevron that pay negative taxes because we give them more tax breaks, government money, than they're paying us. If I'm your president, I'm shifting that money away from oil companies and extractive industries and to farmers. I believe if we pay farmers to do the kind of practices that are restorative and regenerative, that can actually create revenue streams for you and start to proliferate practices more like cover crops, no-till farming, and those kind of things. It's going to get more resources for you, but that's going to how we're going to be pulling tons and tons of carbon out of the air, and that's how we get out of this climate crisis we're in, by farmers leading the way. All right. I'm sorry, we're going to go to this young man. I hate to do men in a row, but this young man, then the woman here. Young man, sir, how old are you, by the way?
7.
You're 17?
7.
Just 7. Okay, can you ask me a question, sir? I'm really excited about your question.
What are you going to do for kids in public school?
Love that question. I love that question. Well, I promise you that I won't make you shave your head like me. Although it cuts down wind resistance, I'm telling you right now. You'll be faster in track. I think this is one of the most important issues in our country right now. And I hate to say this, but, you know, and I feel like I can say this, I got so much Iowa family. My Des Moines caucuses are going to be huge because about 100 family members are going to be caucusing for me. But I just wanted you to know that your state right now is not funding your public schools adequately at all. Not paying public school teachers what they should pay them. And on really important issues that we don't talk about enough as a society, but if I'm your president, it's going to change. We don't talk about mental health and having mental health professionals in our schools and the other professionals that we need. So to your question, this is what I'm going to do. From the federal level, number one, I'm going to get more resources for the Iowa public schools. I'm going to do it in a number of ways. First is I'm going to triple what's called Title I funding. That means the schools that you have in the lowest income areas will see a tripling of their revenue streams from the federal government, from Title I funding from the federal government. But I'm not stopping there. I think we should be fully funding, and I was just in Spencer with the chairman of with the head of the school board, who told me that about 20-25% of their whole budget is for special education, special needs kids, and that the federal government is not fully funding its portion. It never has. And so the next thing, and he was excited because it would bring millions of dollars to his school alone, but I'm going to bring tremendous resources to Iowa schools by fully funding special education in our country. And that's going to make sure that we can do more. And then the last thing, what's your name? Callan? Callan, do you like your teachers?
Yes.
I like your teachers too. And Callan, the other thing I want to do is make sure that your teachers are adequately paid. And the way that I'm going to do that is two ways that are really big. Because I've met some of the most heroic people in my life have been teachers. I'm here because of my teacher. When I was in grade school, I was terrified about speaking in front of public. And this teacher, Mr. Walker, he pushed me to do the school play so I would get over my fear, and look where I am now. And so I want to make sure your teachers are adequately paid, and the way I'm going to do that, number one, is I'm going to take the tax breaks that are given to hedge fund folks, like carried interest. That means they pay a lower percentage of their salary in taxes than most of the people in this room do. I'm going to take those away, carried interest away, and I'm going to put it for teachers so that they are paying a lower income percentage of their income. But not just teachers. Remember, I want more school professionals, speech pathologists, librarians, nurses. Any of your adults in your school should see an increase. And on top of that, they're going to benefit from something that I have that will benefit probably everybody in this room, something called doubling what's called the Earned Income Tax Credit. And that means that 150 million Americans under my plan, when we roll back the Trump tax cuts from the wealthy and give them to folks who are working every day, that's going to give 150 million Americans a tax break and cut poverty in a third. And in some states, my changing of the tax code for teachers and with the Earned Income Tax Credit increase, teachers around America, some of them will get upwards of a 50% increase. And the last thing to do for school professionals is if you're willing to teach at a public school over a certain number of years, we will forgive all of your student loans, okay?
I want you to address how corporate greed and congressional greed have joined hands for the past many decades, and how you're going to get that out of politics, including lobbyists.
Thank you. Did you all hear her question in the back there? She just said, I don't understand how someone as handsome as you, why Rosario has not said yes to you yet. No, she did not. She said, really goes to the root, I think, of a lot of our problems in our country. The biggest problem. So she's really correctly tied a link between climate change and health care. Every issue we're talking about is being undermined because our Supreme Court, stunningly, this is why I'm going to have a whole different type of Supreme Court justice, has basically said corporations are people. And they can spend whatever they want in our politics. And it has unbelievably put an avalanche of dark money into our politics that's affecting our policy in every way. And that's why well before I was running for president, I became the 5th senator in the United States Senate that says I'm taking the Citizens United and Citizens United pledge. So you can't campaign wrong and then say you're going to govern right. I do not take corporate PAC money. I do not take federal lobbyist money. I do not take pharmaceutical C-suite executive money. I do not take oil company executive money. We said we wanted to run a campaign on the people. And that's why I'm really glad that in Iowa, I'm the candidate running that gets the highest percentage of contributions from Iowa women. Which makes me say, fellas, what's up, guys? Come on. But your question specifically is, Cory, as president, how are you going to deal with this problem? And this is really important. We have got to find a way to break this power and influence of corporate money in America. It is the biggest corrupting force. And that's why I'm going to fight so hard to make sure that it's not. This is why you need a candidate that is not just the one that can beat Donald Trump. A candidate that can energize high voter turnouts in states to win Senate seats. We got to win a Senate seat here in Iowa. Yes. We have got to. But think about your candidates this way, because it's not just winning in Iowa. You got to win states where critical in those states is getting out black and brown folks. We got to get North Carolina Senate seat like Obama was able to do. We've got to get there's 2 seats up in Georgia. We've got to win there. Arizona. So we've got to get somebody in this race who is best positioned to ignite the Obama coalition to win Senate seats all across the board. If you all help me win those Senate seats, like this one here in this state, then we can pass and end Citizens United in legislation. Then we can take this corporate money out. Then we can restrict lobbyists. Some of this I'm going to do as president to myself. When I became mayor, I put a whole bunch of ethics rules on myself. You're not going to have people in my administration going right out and going to work for lobbyists and all this kind of stuff that's corrupt. But we need to pass federal legislation to end once and for all the influence of money in politics, okay? All right.
Last question.
We're going to go for 2 more questions. This is the only exercise of power I get. My staff thinks they're the boss of me. Last question. I'll show you 2 questions. So I'm going to go right here. And then who's my last question? Right in front of me. Oh, my old friend. It's good to see you. Yes. Okay, right there, please.
There's a huge humanitarian crisis at the border. And so my question is, what would you do immediately to ease the backlog at the border? What would you do on the short-term paper basis on immigration? What would you do on the medium-term basis on abortion? What would you do on the long basis on abortion?
On what? On the border.
Not abortion, immigration.
Okay, yeah, you threw me there. You threw me there. It went from immigration to abortion real quick. Okay, so we have this false narrative in our country that often comes out in crisis, where people think to keep ourselves safe, we have to abandon our values. And that is actually a recipe for making us less safe. And so here we have a president that talks about, they're coming and taking over our country and all of these things. And it's creating this toxic atmosphere that's driving us to do things that actually make us less safe and actually violate people's human rights. And so in terms of the immediacy, long-term, midterm, and long-term, let me just tell you, first of all, I'm a United States Senator. I'm not even waiting. I've been out of the border a number of times. I've gone into Juarez, Mexico, and escorted women who were survivors of sexual assault into our country to be able to present themselves for asylum. Because I always want to I never want to repeat the mistakes of the Holocaust, where the St. Louis came here with a ship full of people, of Jews from Eastern Europe, and we turned them away. And so many of them were slaughtered in the Holocaust. We should always be a country that people are escaping the horrors of war or violence, that this is a safe place. And so this is what I'm going to do immediately upon taking office. I'm working on it as a senator. I'm doing everything I can, because all of us can do something in a crisis. You may not be able to do everything. Heck, even just giving to a dollar to a group that represents these immigrants in lawsuits and the like makes a difference. So immediately I'm going to change our process for what we do at the border when people present themselves for asylum. There's a much better way to manage it that doesn't involve all of these private detention facilities. The biggest private prisons, I'm against private prisons, period, but the biggest ones in our country are for immigration detention. And what they do to people, putting pregnant women on pavements, children there, it's a violation of our values. There have been so many pilot programs. Obama administration had one called the Family Case Management Program, where they showed 100% compliance with our court systems without detention. We can do this in a way that doesn't put that kind of detention processes that are violating our values. Children in cages, separating families, and more. Long term, though, we have to do a lot more than that. So I'm going to institute case management, better evaluations, not have the asylum program be abused and breaking the law that it is right now. I'm going to shift resources to our borders. I'm going to do what this president does astonishingly by cutting resources to Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. I don't understand that. It makes no sense. If you want to stop folks from having to come here, go to the countries that are where the problems are and help them solve those problems. And I'm not going to do it America alone. This president has an America First policy, which is really America isolated, America alone. I'm going to join with our allies to make this area of the world a priority. I'm happy that the Middle East is a priority for a lot of folks, but that's very far away. I want to start prioritizing our alliances and our allies on dealing with the violence that's going on in places like El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, small countries. We can do a lot of good. In the long term, though, we've got to pass, and I'm going to do other things on DACA and making sure we're protecting dreamers and others that are here. But I just want to say on the long term, we have to have bipartisan immigration reform. And the way that we do that, in 2013, right before I came to the Senate, they passed a bipartisan bill out of the Senate. That alone would have got $1 trillion off of our deficit. Because when you pull people out of the shadows and they're paying taxes and participating in society, it actually costs us less money and makes us safer. Why does it make us safer? Well, Donald Trump these last 3 years has made us a lot less safe because now in our communities across the country, people don't go, if you're an immigrant, you don't go forward and report crimes anymore. Our police officers in my city tell me it's frustrating as heck. Nobody wants to talk to them. And so assaults or robberies don't get solved like they used to because nobody's cooperating with the police because they're afraid they're going to get deported. In Nevada, I just came out of Nevada, a teenager told me that their friend was assaulted, American citizen, born in this country, but they wouldn't call the authorities or even their principal because they were afraid that their parents would have to come to school and one of their parents was undocumented. Think about this nightmare that we're getting. We're less safe. Our economy is hurting more by not passing comprehensive immigration reform. And so I want you to know the honest truth. Again, me and others in this race have similar immigration policies. It's hard to find differences on a lot of them. Same thing for climate change. Look, there's some differences. I believe in putting a price on carbon. Some don't. There's some small differences. But the question is who can be the leader that actually can get things done when they get into the White House? And that's why I keep talking to you about, number one, my resume as a guy who, remember, I was a mayor of the city of New York, our state's largest city, in a recession with a Republican governor you probably never heard of named Chris Christie. And let me tell you that I was going on a hunger strike and I would not eat again until people gave a damn. Excuse my language. And you know what happened? Thousands of people came out. Police officers from other suburban cities came down to help us out. I'll never forget that last moment when we on this pavement amongst projects. It used to be one of the most dangerous areas. Now we had face painters for kids and all of that. We came together for a final prayer. One of my favorite moments as Americans, we were all holding hands, and there we were, people from all racial backgrounds. There were believers and non-believers. I still remember when people started praying, I heard Hebrew, I heard Arabic, I heard Spanish. But me, I had not eaten in 10 days, and I was weak as heck, but I started hearing the voices of our ancestors. In my faith, I heard that whenever 2 or 3 are gathered together in His name, He is in the midst. I heard the Hebrew, a song sung during the highest holidays of Jews. The Hebrew is Ki beiti tefillah l'chol ho'nim. May my house be a house of prayer for many nations. And I heard these 3 words from a dead language that are the whole of a very young country. And those words are E pluribus unum. My whole campaign is about this idea. In all of my life, I've done extraordinary things to ignite the conscience of a country, to get things done people said could not get done. My record is turning around one of America's most maligned cities to now a place where big companies are moving back. Panasonic's North American headquarters, they're all coming back to our city. In the Senate, I made fun of some guys because I like going around hanging out with Republicans. Why? Well, I go to Bible study in Chairman Inhofe's office, a right-wing conservative, not just because I want to find common ground with him, but he and I have already passed legislation to protect foster kids and homeless kids. We are not each other's enemy. There's a lot of people in this race, but I hope you'll put your faith in caucus for me, because I'm the person that, yeah, I'll fight for the policies that my other team members will in the Democratic Party, but I'm committed to knowing what it really takes to get that policy accomplished, and that is building a more united country where we're all much more involved and committed to making the change, where we don't surrender our values, don't have leaders that do moral vandalism every day, but leaders that elevate our highest values, highest virtues, and challenge this nation to live up to the best of who we are. Last question. Last question, my friend.
Hi, my question is, we need to thank our press to going around and to these campaign people to go around and talk, we need to just give them a round of applause for these people, for our reporters who give up their time, their home, to go around and like follow you around the United States. So we need to give them a round of applause.
I've been having this experience campaigning in Iowa where I've got cavities now because Iowans are so sweet. I'm sorry, dad jokes will continue to come. Why does Santa's elves love Jay-Z? Because like them, he's a great rapper. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've lost Caucasers now. One dad back there, I see a father, and dad back there is like, yes, I love it. I'm taking it home with me. Let me end on this idea of kindness and grace and decency. And really why that's the governing value of this campaign. Why you see me as the person on the campaign, the debate stages, just calling us to be good to each other. And why I think that that is actually what beats Donald Trump. We're 48 hours from Christmas, and I know everybody here doesn't celebrate, but and I'm one of these people that says, before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me how you treat me. I just want you to know that my life making a decision, I'm the only senator that lives in a low-income neighborhood below the poverty line. Because I'm just driven by ideals of Matthew 25. And yet I got to Newark, and with this complex that was quickly beaten out of me in a metaphorical way by great Newarkers, then I thought I was coming there, Cory Booker on duty, I'm here to help. But the incredible leaders in that community are like, we don't need a savior, we need each other. And if you help us to day and gruesome thing. Gun violence and dying of gun violence is just gruesome. I mean, blood was everywhere. I'm trying to hold his chest together and screaming for people, call the ambulance, call the paramedic. And he stops breathing, and I'm terrified. Foamy blood is coming from his mouth. I'm sticking my hand in his mouth, trying to clear a passageway, do whatever I can to get him to breathe, to breathe, to breathe. Eventually the paramedics come and shove me out of the way, open his shirt, start working on him then, but I know he's dead. They put him in the ambulance, they drive away, I walk down the steps.
All right.
All right, here we go.
All right, Senator.
Listen for my cue.
Kathy, they're gonna come down. They're gonna
Hey, Cory!
So, first of all, an act of rebellion and defiance. I was told by my staff to never ever tell this Christmas joke again. So here goes. Here goes. Why do elves like Jay-Z?
Why?
Because like them, he is a great rapper. I'm sorry. All right. So I hate to say this, but we have to do a little work because my staff gave me again an act of defiance. At the last event, we were there in Indianola, packed, people out the door. An incredible crowd. It was really wonderful. Got a whole bunch of commitments to caucus. This whole trip has been amazing. We've gotten 2 county chair people, Democratic county chairs endorsing us, another state rep. It's been just great momentum on this bus trip. But then I was the last event we had. This doesn't count as an event. This is a lot of fun with family, friends, and Nancy Bobo. But I was told that I had lines to say for a commercial that we're going to air. The great thing is that we now have seen a record online fundraising for our campaign. Who needs Bloomberg money or Steyer money when you've got the people with you? So the momentum has been giving us more resources. So now we hit January. The strategy is to go up on TV and to actually see that help us to get the polling numbers up to get on that last debate stage. That's the way to go. But amongst friends, I want you to know, amongst friends, it's actually my, give Mike Frozen alone a lot of love. If you can, give him a round of applause.